All right, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I hope you are all awake and energized after your break. Everyone's ready?
Yeah.
Okay, and today you have seen why people tell stories. You've seen why stories can be personal and should be personal in some cases. And you have seen the different and varied methodologies of telling stories and different mediums you can use to tell stories. Today, right now, I am going to tell you a little bit more about how to tell stories effectively and better. So I'm just going to skip past this since you've already introduced me. So what I want you all to do right now is not 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and all of you are going to do something called free writing, which means you are just going to put pen to paper and write continuously. Don't think, don't edit, don't rethink what you're doing, just write 5 minutes straight. Your time starts now.
About what?
Anything, whatever comes to mind. The last dream you had, what you had for lunch, your, how you're nervous about your exams coming up, whatever. All right, has everyone got a little bit of something written down? Anyone who's got nothing at all? Okay, that's enough. Okay, so you can just put that aside for now. We will get back to that later. So let's talk about what you think creative writing is. Any idea what creative writing is? Using your creativity to write about stuff? Definitely. What comes under creative writing? What kind of writing comes under creative writing? Yes?
Fictional stories.
Fictional stories. Anything else?
Mythical pieces. Anything that requires their imagination.
True. I mean, that's not entirely true, actually. That's a bit of a gray area. Okay, so creative writing can include creative fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. Any of you are partake in writing short stories, fiction, poetry, anything like that? Okay, so we do have writers in the audience, and you are interested to be better writers. So that is what we're going to do today. We are going to be speaking about how we write. Can I have the next slide, please? Does this work? Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so we are going to do this step by step. So the first step towards writing is getting ideas and inspiration. So let's see. Every story has an inspiration. Every story has a place where you begin. So that can be, somebody told me that they wanted to write an autobiography at some point, so that would be from your personal experiences. Sometimes it's not from your personal experiences, but your surroundings and the experiences of people around you. Another person in the audience told me that they wanted to write a story about Palestine. So that would be from your surroundings, from politics, whatever. But in my experience, what we gain most inspiration from is other writers. So a huge part of learning how to write well is learning to read, to choose the kind of writers you enjoy, to choose what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, and why you enjoy it. So what I want all of you to do right now is, you've done basic graphs in math before, yes? So what I want you to do is draw a 2D graph with poorly written and well written on the x-axis and your likes and dislikes on the y-axis. What?
Wait, what's on the x-axis?
X-axis with poorly written to well written, and y-axis from what you like to what you dislike. So what we're going to do here is we're going to learn to differentiate the kind of fiction that we consume, not just fiction, whether it's music, books, movies, TV shows, whatever it is, whatever media that you consume. I want you to think about why you consume it and whether that falls into the category of you like it and it is good, or whether you like it and it's not very well written but you enjoy it for maybe nostalgia reasons, or maybe just because it speaks to you personally for some reason. Or it could be that you dislike it and you do think that you dislike it for valid reasons and it's not very well done. Or it could be that you dislike it, but you can admit that it was well written, it was well done, but it isn't for you personally. So those are the four categories. And to make it clearer, this is mine. So I want you all to take 2 minutes, make the graph, and sort your interests out. 1984. All right, are you guys done? You need a minute? All right, yeah.
We have this.
One second. We can do that later. Okay. I mean, I do have a lot of thoughts on that. I'd be happy to get into it, but I think that would take too much time from this. It's just the way I am with that. All right, yeah. Okay. All right. So everyone has something written in each quadrant?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. One thing, each quadrant. Okay. Moving on. Okay, everyone pay attention. Okay, great. So, can anyone tell me why it is important to be able to distinguish between things you enjoy for entertainment and things you enjoy for their own merit, and where that overlap happens? Any ideas? Yeah?
So that you can find a balance.
So you can find a balance? Anyone else? Yeah?
Maybe like to do with like bias and like spotting your own biases.
Yes, very good. Yeah?
When you tell someone to like watch something or read something, you can tell them that I have a bias.
Okay, yeah, sure. Anything else? All right. So, why I think it is important that you know the difference on why you like something, whether you enjoy it because it is well written or whether you enjoy it for other reasons, even when you don't think it's very good, or, you know, similarly, when you dislike it, is so that you know what kind of inspiration you draw from each thing. So if you think something is well written, you obviously take literary inspiration from it, you enjoy it, you can, you can find what themes of it you enjoy, what about it makes it entertaining to you, so that you can take it as inspiration for your own work. Contrarily, when you dislike something well written, you can try to analyze what about it makes you dislike it. So, like he asked, why I don't enjoy 1984. And for me personally, the way Winston speaks about women in the book makes me really uncomfortable personally. So I do think it's a good book and it has a good message and it is quite relevant today, especially with the whole TikTok censoring and newspeak and things like that. I do think it's a very relevant book, but I personally feel very uncomfortable when I read it. So I know that there are merits to the book, but there is a reason why I don't enjoy it particularly. On the other hand, things you don't like and you think are poorly written, you know why you would not want to make the same mistakes that they did, yes? So all four of these things are almost entirely subjective. Me as a literature student and a writer, I might have a completely different idea of what is poorly written and what is well written, considering the genres I'm interested in and considering the kinds of books I read. But you might have a completely different perspective on it. But for your personal writing, it's important that you understand why you enjoy things before you take inspiration from them. All right? Does that make sense? All right, perfect. So next, we're going to be speaking about structure. So we are speaking mostly about storytelling today, so I will continue with that theme. So when it comes to structure, there is the kind of structures that are currently existing and what are common and what you will learn in every creative writing class ever. And then there are people who break free from those norms. But it is important to understand a norm before you break free from it, because otherwise you're not making a conscious choice, you're just letting the story get away from you. So to give an example, I'm going to tell you about two very commonly used story structures, which is, the first one is called the hero's journey, where I think you'll find it very familiar to a lot of popular stories you've read, where there is this ordinary person with an ordinary life, and then they have a call to adventure, and then something incredible happens, and they're taken out of their regular, ordinary world, and they set about on this adventure. They find a mentor, there are several inciting events, there are things that happen, and eventually they defeat the antagonist, and then they return home. Can someone give me an example of a hero's adventure? Yes. I mean, yeah, sort of. Yeah, I would say Harry Potter. He doesn't quite return home in the end, but it still works. Yeah, Harry Potter. Anyone else? Percy Jackson as well. Yeah, so the hero's journey is a very commonly used story structure. Another commonly used story structure is called the three-part story structure, the three-act story structure, where there is a regular person, there is an inciting event, which is, what incites them to take action, and then there is a plot point, and then there is the second act, where they fail, and then there's the third act where they succeed again, there's the climax, and then there is something we call a denouement in French, which means to wrap everything up. So all the loose ends are tied up, and everyone has their little moment where, you know how there's always an epilogue of where everyone is now, that sort of story. Can somebody give me an example of that kind of story? Yeah? Incredible, yes. All right, anyone else? Okay, so those are some existing structural conventions that are provided to us by the norms set to us by authors past, the people who are popular, the things that have been working for centuries. There have been stories that have been following the same kind of pattern for ages. Now, there are people who want to break free of it. So you transgress from a plot point, or you subvert a trope, and that makes your story different. But the thing is that you cannot subvert a trope without understanding the point of the trope first. One of my favorite trope subversions, which is, I think, something that you will understand today because Dune just came out, but Paul Atreides in Dune is the trope of the chosen hero, but in the end you know that he's not actually a hero, and he is, Okay, all right. So, it breaks free of the conventions of the chosen hero and the prophesized hero who will come save the world, when Paul Atreides is, Paul Atreides, white savior, all of that. So the point is that if you want to break the conventions, you have to understand the convention so you can do it effectively. All right, so then we go to planning, which is the next step before you actually start writing. So has anyone written a short story before? Yeah? So what do you do before you begin writing?
You have to have an idea.
You have to have an idea, yes? And what else do you have to do?
Get a pen and a paper.
True, you do have to prepare that much, but you also prepare a flow of things, of whether you make this into a word cloud, whether you make it into a proper web, or you create it into a flowchart or whatever. You create a proper plan for what you want to do. You might not necessarily follow the plan once you start writing, because that is the experience of every writer ever when you create a neat little plan and it kind of falls apart in the end. But that is part of the process. You need to have a neat beginning to be able to begin. So that is that's how we plan to write. And let us move on to the actual writing part. Okay, so writing, in my opinion, takes three important things: creativity, clarity, and consistency. So what part, since we're speaking about creative writing and we've spoken about ideas and things like that, what else do we need from your, what else do you want to be creative about? How can you be creative in different ways when it comes to writing?
Hidden message.
Hidden message, okay, so you're using language to be creative. What else?
How you design a character.
How you design a character. Yes, that's very clever. Character design is a big part of writing a story. Anything else anyone would like to contribute? Yes? Symbolism, yeah, great. Okay, so you're thinking of subverting tropes, and very good. Continue. What? Humor, yes. All of these are very good ideas. So that is what we do. We use our characters, we use our structure, we use language, style, ideas, whatever it is, to be creative, to have a sense of originality in your work. For example, there is a popular children's book called Watership Down. I'm not sure if you have read it, any of you. But what they do in that is that they create a language as you go through the book. So there is a civilization, let's say, of people who use a different kind of language. And as you get further in the book, you learn more of the language. And when you reach the end, one of the characters says a full sentence in that language, which is entirely created for this book, and you understand it as a reader. So the writer there is taking language and using it as a tool of creativity. They are creating a language of their own, and they are teaching the reader as we go. Or we can take normal people. And you see the way she does not use quotation marks when she writes. And she knows the conventions of writing. She knows how grammar works. The reason she is not using that is to create the sort of stream of consciousness feel to the book, which she succeeds in doing, in my opinion. You can disagree, but that is how writing works. Everyone has different opinions on it. But that is how you can use your creativity to make an original feel to your work. Another important thing about writing is clarity. Once you have an idea and you have set motivations for characters, you have an idea of what happens when, what happens where, and what happens why, you have to find a way to make it clear to the audience. So Dune is another great example of that, because we can see right now a lot of people who have very much misunderstood the plot of the movie, I would say. I don't think they've read the books, because the movies miss the entirety of Paul's internal monologue. So you don't know his intentions, really. You only see what's happening at face value, which makes it easy to interpret it in a different way. So clarity in intention and clarity in what is happening is an important thing. And it is just as important to be a little, put wool over your reader's eyes every now and then. So when you are not being clear, it has to be intentional. It has to be a deliberate act of trying to hide something from your reader, to keep them in suspense, to let them figure it out a little bit later. So to be able to do that, you need to know when to be clear and when not to be clear. But there are certain things you do need to take care of while writing. There is, of course, grammar and spelling, which I'm expecting all of you have heard from your teachers over and over again. Another thing is tense. A lot of people tend to mix up past and present tense while writing. And it is best to find the tense that works for your story, whether that is past, whether that's present, or what if you're writing a really funky story, future tense. But once you find the tense that works for your story, it is best to stick to one tense so that there is clarity in your work, there is, so that the readers aren't taken in and out of time as they're reading. So tense is something important to take care of. Another important thing while writing is to not have one full wall of text. All right? So whenever you're writing a paragraph, you need to have paragraph breaks every now and then. A good tip I learned when I was younger is the words tip-top. So every time you change time, every time you change place, every time you change topic, and every time you change person, you have a paragraph break. So can someone tell me what the tip-top stands for? Time.
Topic.
Yeah.
Place.
Person, correct. All right, perfect. So every time that changes, you create a paragraph break so that there is clarity for the readers. And next there's obviously structure. When you're structuring your story, choose a structure that works with your story. Don't choose a structure that will completely throw off and try to shoehorn a story that doesn't quite fit into that sort of structure into a pre-made structure. You are allowed creativity with how you want to structure your story. You do not have to stick to the conventions, but whatever you're doing, do it with intention. Choose it. Do not just let it happen. Lastly, it is important to maintain what you're doing. So, like I said with tense, you have to keep the same thing going as the story progresses. But there are other things that get messed up as time progresses. So time, which includes pacing and tense. So you can't have the story start out really, really slow and then get really fast and then really, really slow again. There's got to be some sort of consistency as you write so that the readers don't drop off entirely. And then you have character motivations, characters' ideals, what they believe, what they don't believe, what they want to fight against, what they are doing this for. So these things are central to the story, especially when it comes to your protagonist. It is essential that you have a good understanding of why they are doing what they are doing. And you keep that consistent throughout the story unless there is an event that changes it. So without reason and without cause, they don't just change what is central to their personality. If there is such a major change happening, it has to be within the story. And different characters have different voices. So you don't use the way you speak for all of the characters' dialogues. So it takes a while, but you find your character's voice. You find how they speak, whether they use a lot of terms of endearment, whether they use a lot of contractions, whether they use a lot of slang, or are they very proper? Do they swear? Do they not swear? That sort of thing. So once you find your character's voice, it is important that you learn to differentiate between the voices of different characters so that when a character speaks, even if there isn't a speech tag at the end of it, so like this and this says Ben, once a reader is at least partway through the book, they should be able to tell who is the speaker without having to read at the end. One thing that I have found that writers tend to kind of lose track of is objects. So you don't have to write every single thing down. You don't have to write that this person entered a room by opening the door and then turned around and shut the door behind them. You don't have to do that. But if you are in a situation, for example, you say a person was holding a teacup, taking a sip of tea, and they get really terrible news, and then it just continues with the scene, and they have left the room, and you have no idea what happened to the teacup. So if you've picked an object up, you have to set it down at some point. So basically, visualizing your character as the person goes through the scene. So it's a good idea to try to picture how you would go through the scene, or how you would picture the character going through the scene, so you understand what you're missing out on, so that the writing feels more fluid and natural, so that it doesn't feel like it is just still images, and rather it has a flow to it. Okay, so we have another activity. Writing, like any other exercise and anything else creative, requires warm-up. If you write enough, you will notice that when you start writing, and by the time you've ended that session, the last part of what you wrote is probably going to be better than the first part of what you wrote. It's like when you have rusty pipes, you have to let the water run a little bit before it runs clear. So what I want you to do is, one of my favorite warm-up activities when writing is you begin a sentence with the letter A, and then each following sentence you use the next letter of the alphabet. It can be about whatever you want. Just go through a few of the letters. So it is something that requires a little bit of creativity, a little bit of thinking, but it doesn't have to be about your big project that you're working on. So you can get a little bit of writing done, get the flow going, and then you will be able to write your actual project better. So I want you all to try that right now. So start with A. You've got 5 minutes. No, 5 minutes is too much. Let's do 2 minutes. Start. All right, stop. Okay, so the point of this was just to show you that there are things you can do. This isn't the only warm-up exercise you can do before writing. There are plenty of other things you can do. You can do just a bit of free writing if you prefer, or you can do something more structured. But the point is to write something a little low stakes before you get into the project you're working on, so that you actually have a flow of writing before you begin. So you don't have to rewrite your first 4 sentences by the time you reach the end of whatever you're doing. All right. Now we come to arguably the most important step of writing, which is editing. As my favorite English teacher, and quite possibly the person who inspired me to write as a child, used to always say, you can edit a bad page, you can't edit a blank page. So editing is a big part of writing. So why do we need to edit our work? Anyone has, yeah?
To refine it and make it better.
To refine it and make it better. And? That is the essence of the idea. So you make your work better by editing it. Why does that occur? See, especially when you work on longer projects, if you're working on perhaps a novel, it will take maybe a year, maybe more to write. So when you start out as a novice even, by the time you've ended the book, you're a much better writer than you were at the beginning. You'll be able to catch mistakes that you made. You'll be able to structure the story better. So it is important that you go back to what you wrote and look at it and see whether it is up to the mark. So you get the opportunity to change and make the changes you need to make your story cohesive. So what do we look for when editing? Anyone? What do you look for when you're editing a piece of work? Yeah.
First, I think like biggest things to edit, like the maybe biggest mistakes or like biggest things that you want to change. So don't look for like the small things that you want to edit first, like maybe look for the big ones.
Okay, so like plot holes and things like that. Yeah, that makes sense. So you find that your character is not being the character you want it to be. That makes sense. Yeah.
Coherency, like readability, relevance, and grammar.
Excellent. Okay, great. So yeah. So what you're going to do when you're rereading a piece is that you're going to make sure that there is readability. So whether your readers can read it, so there's not just huge walls of text, too much jargon for the demographic you're going for, things like that. And you're going to look for whether everything you put into the story is relevant to the story. The term, are you raising your hand? Okay. The term kill your darlings is used when you need to take out portions that you have written, perhaps a character, perhaps a scene, that no longer works with the story. So you have to make sure that you don't just have giant swaths of things that are not always relevant to how the story is progressing. It doesn't always have to be plot relevant, it could be character relevant, but it has to be relevant to the story. And there is, of course, the regular things, tense, grammar, spelling, all of that. So what I want you to do now is take 1 minute and go back to the thing you wrote at the beginning of the session, the free writing you did. And I want you to spend 1 minute trying to find mistakes you made there. Okay, so what did you find? Are you perfect writers on the first try?
No.
Exactly. Nobody is a perfect writer on the first try. Everyone makes mistakes when they're writing the first time. And it is important to go back to what you've written and try to make it better so that when you show people, show the world your work, it is the best version of your work. All right. We have come to the end of the session. If anyone has any questions, I would be happy to take them.